I feel like a lot of people just kind of take for granted when it comes to selling their businesses and everything. Just without diving too much into what the topic is, just you want to tell them a little bit about what we're going to be talking about?
Yeah, definitely. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about the migration process here at Empire Flippers. It's part of the value package that we offer our sellers that we handle the migration for you after the deal is sold. And so I'll be covering the overview of main our FBA migration. So any type of Amazon FBA fulfillment by Amazon
Yeah,
business.
and that's why I mean it's kind of something that people take for granted because when you sell the business, you kind of think, okay, well, I'm done with it. But there's actually steps that you as the seller and you as the buyer need to take to ensure a successful transition there. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today when dealing with Amazon FBA. But before we do, I mean, let's kind of introduce ourselves a little bit. So I am Jake Davis, and if you've watched the last two, then you know who I am. But if this is your first time joining us for the webinar, this is episode 3. So we're really excited about this show. But yeah, episode 3. So I'm Jake Davis. I am a 22-year-old, soon to be graduated electrical engineering student from University of Central Florida in Orlando. And I got started with Empire Flippers last summer. I was given the really cool opportunity to do the seller interviews for them. And so if you've listened to a seller interview over the last, I don't know, since July maybe, you'll have heard my voice, and now this is the face. And it's really cool. I'm engaged. My fiance and I will be getting married this December, which, really excited about. And then, other than that, I spend my time, working and, playing video games. I stream on Twitch, and uh, if we were to look around my apartment, I have way too many like memorabilia. That's the wrong word, but little figurines and stuff from Nintendo and stuff. But it's pretty cool. But yeah, that's about me. Andy, what do you got going on?
Well, first off, what's the game you're streaming?
I stream The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. I'm doing
Oh,
speed
nice,
running
nice.
of it, and so that's yeah, that's pretty cool. I'm actually seventh in the world in the glitchless category right now. My goal is top 3. We'll hopefully get it.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Good to see you, fellow engineers. So, a little bit about me, Andy Wu. I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia. I was born and raised there, grew up there all my life. And being a fellow engineer, I graduated from Georgia Tech as a chemical engineer. And I started my role with Empire Flippers about 10 to 11 months ago. And now I'm working as the migrations manager for the migrations department at Empire Flippers. Currently, I'm located in Taipei, Taiwan. And over the last year, some of my hobbies, some of my favorites have been traveling the world. So I've been had the chance to go to maybe 20, 30 countries over the last year alone. While part of that was traveling before this job, and now I'm traveling, a lot less, but still some with this job. And like Jake said, I spend a lot of my spare time also playing video games. But um, I've been a huge Overwatch fan lately. Love watching some crazy streams of that. But other than that, I also love traveling the world. My goal is to hit every country at some point in the world. I also play basketball, ultimate frisbee, and here in Taiwan, as well as I love eating.
Oh,
So foodie is a big thing in Asia. So love eating, love drinking all the different types of drinks that they have here, and yeah,
yeah.
it's a little
I
bit about me.
personally am less interested in like drinks, but if you give me a good piece of food, man, I am all about that food. Yeah, that's cool. What's the coolest place that you've traveled to?
Oh man, there's so many choices, and I get asked this question all the time. I would say I really loved Portugal. Strictly because like you can get kind of almost everything you want there. You have great wine in Porto. that I just fell in love with when I was there. Just a charming city, and you have kind of a more kind of bustling city in Lisbon, and then you have like the Cove down, where Lagos, Portugal is, and you can go surfing, you can go cliff diving, and it's all of that's within like a bus ride or a train ride of each other. So gorgeous place, love the weather, love the people, and love the super heavy food that they have there sometimes.
Oh man, I actually did not get a chance to eat lunch before this. So as soon as we wrap up here in about an hour, I will be heading to get something delicious. But anyway, so I guess that's enough of an introduction. Andy, let's talk about migration for an Amazon FBA business. There's a lot of things to keep in mind when dealing with that, and I guess the first thing to talk about is to define what exactly is migration.
Yeah, definitely. So the formal definition of a migration is the proper transfer of the assets related to the business from the seller to the buyer. So we're ensuring that we make a technical and transition completely okay between both parties. And for us at Empire Flippers, that means the buyer and the seller have already agreed upon a offer for the terms of the sale. That means you've already talked, you've done through negotiations, you've talked through certain, training, and you've also looked at price and if there's an earnout or something like that. And at the point of the migration, the money from the deal has already been received into the Empire Flippers bank account, and we are ready to go at moving the assets at that point. Throughout, once you're in migration, the due diligence period is essentially over, and we will be proceeding, 100% to move the assets over to the buyer.
Yeah, so I mean it's a lot of just handling the transition stuff, the stuff that you don't think about when handling the moving from the seller to the buyer. And so I guess a question that I have right off the bat that I want to ask you is how long, you said the migration process really starts when Empire Flippers receives the money. So how long does it take for the seller to receive the money from Empire Flippers? I couldn't think buyer seller, like I was trying to keep them in my head. But yeah, how long does it take for the seller to receive the money from Empire Flippers?
Yeah, it actually varies case by case. I know like a lot of our material we talk a lot about between, 2 and 4 weeks or, up to 2 weeks but it really just depends really case to case. Sometimes where have to go back and forth on a asset purchase agreement, there's lawyers involved. And so we're trying to get the
Mm-hmm.
terminology right. So the migration might be delayed. I would say on average, because we have a 2 week inspection period as part of our terms of service, you can expect 3 to 4 weeks for an average migration. Amazon FBA migrations, due to a lot of varied factors from support or shipping times and things like that, it could be 4 to 6 weeks. So,
Yeah.
and it depends also on the experience of the buyer and the seller. If they both understand the asset that they're buying and they give us all the information that we need right away, we can make it really quick. But if we have to go in there, sometimes we go in there and we do it for them and we start creating it for them. It takes a little bit more time.
So you've said a couple times that it's different. It's a case by case basis for how long it takes and what exactly the process means. Can we just kind of talk a little bit more about how it varies?
Yeah, so for example, let's just say on a very small technical level, like hosting for a website. There's a lot of different hosts. You can go to GoDaddy, you can go to HostGator, you can go, a lot of different places, and not all of them offer cPanel hosting. And so for some migrations, we have to either figure out a way to set up a cPanel environment if the WordPress site was created in cPanel. And so that's kind of just one small factor. And when you start messing with a different amount of options provided by hosting, domain names, affiliate programs, support reps, account reps, inventory, all those factors pretty much just play into the amount of time that it takes for us to get through a
Mm-hmm.
migration.
And about the time invested can also be, changed if it's an earnout. If it's some kind of deal where the payment for the business is going to be distributed over a, you know, over the coming months and in the future rather than all up front right away. So when talking about an earnout, I mean, how does that process change in terms of, what does the buyer and seller need to be aware of?
Yeah, so with the earnouts usually officially start after the migration is over. So during the migration process, we go through, make sure all of the assets are migrated properly, and then once we take a look at the assets, make sure the revenue is flowing where it needs to be, then we usually start an earnout. Keep in mind that's per our most common type of earnout structure. There are certain structures depending on the deal that you negotiate, where we pay out based on certain days or pay out certain, at installments, or we look back at it quarterly. It really
Mm-hmm.
just depends on your agreement. But at the end of the day, that definitely starts after the
Mm-hmm.
migration process is over.
Oh, one thing I forgot to mention when we were introducing, and this is, you know, something that's very important. I want you guys to be aware of
Yeah.
is definitely any questions that you have. We will be doing a Q&A session at the end of this. So any questions that you have, post them in Facebook, post them on YouTube, and we'll make sure to get to as many of them as we can. We really want to provide content that is designed to help you individually. So if there's something that you aren't understanding, let us know. We can help you out with that. So anyway, let's get back to it. And something that's interesting and really the core topic of our discussion today is that everything's a little bit different depending on the kind of business that it is. And today we want to walk you through the Amazon FBA side of things. So what goes into it when you're not just it's not just a regular business, it's an Amazon business.
Yeah, so we can start from the top. So we're speaking strictly here about FBA. So this is fulfillment by
Yes.
Amazon. So it's kind of a form of e-commerce per se, where Amazon handles a lot of the operations in delivering your product to the buyer and handling refunds and items like that. And so this migration process is specific to FBA. And so with FBA, we have two main methods of moving the asset over to um, the buyer. And this consists of a listing transfer or a seller account takeover. And so just to give you an overview, as we'll cover this in more detail later, the seller account is a direct change of the account credentials within your Amazon seller account. And this is mainly used with Amazon FBA businesses that have a US marketplace associated with them. The listing transfer is a move of the sellers who are able to sell on the listings that are generating the revenue for the asset. And so in this case, the seller is establishing a new seller account, but he will be the only seller after you guys finish the listing transfer. And so,
Yeah, so which
yep, go ahead.
which does Empire Flippers recommend?
It actually depends on your situation. So this is where a lot of the factors come in. If you have a USA and a European marketplace, FBA, and they participate in both marketplaces, you're actually going to have to do both. We do propose a seller account takeover if you're experienced, because it's pretty quickly. You guys both know the interface, you know what information to change. But also, it depends on your situation. If your accountant is telling you, or if your other partner is telling you, oh, we want to manage all the products in the list in one seller account, then we'll do a listing transfer and move the products to you
Mm-hmm.
that way.
So, I mean, I guess let's just go down the list here. Are you selling your Amazon seller account?
No, we are only selling the asset that owns the
Mm-hmm.
seller account. So you're selling the entity. Yep.
And we'll talk more about the uh, European outside of the U.S. side of things when we get, we have, we're going to talk about that. But I guess just right now, how does it change if you're selling in multiple countries?
Yeah, in the multiple countries, essentially we will do what's best for each country. So For example, with the USA, we're going to do a seller account takeover, and we'll help get you through that first portion. Once you finish the US side, we'll start working on your EU marketplace side. We'll get your account established. We'll get all your listings moved into there. And then once that's done, we'll link your US and EU account together.
So another big question, and it's something that I run across on some seller interviews, is that inventory, is a bit of a tricky thing because sometimes, inventory is not normally included in the listing price. So when you buy the business, do you buy the inventory? And I guess unless, going off of what I just said, unless you negotiate to include inventory in the price, the answer is going to be no. And so if you buy a business, who gets the profits on the inventory that the seller owned?
Yeah, so definitely in migrations, we help you out with this. But our golden rule for inventory is essentially whoever pays for the landed cost retains the profit. So, for example, if you buy all the inventory at the time that the deal is signed and the money comes in, then any profits, no matter who it gets paid out to, is the buyer, since he's paying for the landed cost of the inventory. It does make the calculations a little bit, funky, and you have to, go back and back calculate who sent that much to who, etc. But at the end of the day, we help you make those calculations, and we also help you time it sometimes so that the inventory payout is in calculation is much easier.
Yeah, do you ever run into issues with that?
Not really in terms of payment issues, no. Essentially, we just run into calculation issues where we help them verify, and so we do a lot of verification. So we take a look at their Amazon seller account, we print out reports, transaction reports, just to double check and make sure that the amount of inventory that got sold on that date is that amount, and what that landed cost is, and how much profit they've made from that.
Yeah. So now that we have decided to sell the business and it's time to migrate, how does the process of the seller account transfer, how does that work?
Yeah, so just to highlight kind of in overview, to seller account takeover, we first talk to the buyer and to prepare the proper business credentials. And that includes, bank information, credit card, etc. So all that has to be prepared previously. We also double check here to make sure the buyer doesn't have a previous seller account, or he needs to have permission to have two seller accounts. And so, some buyers have a existing Amazon FBA account that they maybe have another business or another brand in. And if they want to just directly take over this account, they do need to get written permission from seller performance at Amazon to have this second account. And once we get that permission, then we move on to the credential takeover. If there's no previous seller account that they've had in the past, it's okay too. We also just want to make sure that they're not using an email that has been associated with a past closed down seller account. So once we have that set, we get the proper permission and directions from Amazon support to update all the essential credentials. And we have a template, we have a script that we use here. But essentially, once we get that response back, you have the directions to edit the business entity, the legal information, tax information, bank account, and all the essential credentials. Then we have the buyer and the seller schedule a time over either something like Skype, some type of screen sharing service where you can enter in the details into the seller account of all of the buyer's information. And once that's gone through, we move next to the login credentials, and this is when we make sure the password and the email and two-step verification get properly moved over to the buyer. And after that, essentially we move on to supplier introductions. So once you've got the account migrated in, the buyer's starting to log in from his computer. They're starting to do some other migration items, including training on the FBA account itself, and then doing strategy training like PPC or promos, and any other type of supplier introductions that they need to set up, like payment gateways and things like that.
Yeah, so that's, obviously a lot of, content there. That's a lot of information. As a buyer or seller, what do what are the key things that you need to worry about, and what are the key things that Empire Flippers will handle?
Yeah, so the key things for this specific process, for the buyer and the seller, is ensuring that you guys are communicative about the times to
Mm-hmm.
meet up, and preparing all the information beforehand. So unfortunately, Empire Flippers can't set up your LLC. We can't do a lot of those legal things that have to be done in your name. But what we will do is what EF does more so is give you the scripts and give you the timing, give you pictures, give you directions exactly on what to change and at what timing to change
Mm-hmm.
it at. And so EF handles the guidance around that, but you have to be the buyer and the seller have to be the one that actually enters in the information.
Another question that I have is, and obviously, we're Empire Flippers. We handle the brokerage of online businesses. We're definitely experts in this field. But if someone, hadn't heard of Empire Flippers, or, for whatever reason didn't want to use us, I mean, is it difficult to do this, or would you recommend hiring a professional like Empire Flippers?
I would say that definitely the steps are pretty straightforward. They make sense, and people do this all the time without even realizing it. But if you want to make sure you have the full protection, you want to make sure you don't get flagged for security issues or make a violation in some way, then going with a broker who's done this multiple times is the best way to go.
Yeah, so now let's run through some common questions that we get when talking about the migration of Amazon FBA. And the first is, why do we have to ask Amazon for permission?
So we do this essentially because we want to get written confirmation that we were allowed to change the credentials in case they ask us for a security risk. So just like I answered like the last question, they're like, "Oh, why did you change your bank account?" Or "Why? How did you change your bank account?" You can literally reply, be like, "Hey, we told you it's happening. The business has been bought." And this is what you told us to do, and we follow the exact directions. And that way, they don't really have any leeway to either put a hold on account or
Mm-hmm.
anything like that.
So, also, do we need to have all of the credential information ready at the time of the sale?
At the time of the sale, definitely not. But like I mentioned before, this is something that really affects
Mm-hmm.
the timing. So if the buyers like got to go form the LLC and get an EIN number, then it's gonna we have to wait a few
Mm-hmm.
days. But you don't have to have it all ready at the time of the sale, as sometimes you don't realize you need certain information, and we help provide you like, hey, this is the information that you're gonna need. When you get it, just let us know. So the answer to that is kind of like a yes and no. So it'd be great if you did. It'll help speed up the migration, but it's not
Yeah, I
imperative.
mean, I guess it just comes back to what Andy said, where it's a time thing. If you want to get in and out of the sale of the business, then have the stuff ready to go right away, ahead of time. If you aren't super concerned, it's obviously not necessary right away, but it is something that you will need eventually. So the sooner you get that stuff done, the sooner we can move on with the migration. And
Yeah.
so something that I run into with the seller interviews is the sellers like to hear a little bit about, you know, how does everything work? What are you doing for Facebook advertising? What are you doing for this? And kind of like a training call with the previous owner. And then also we need to have these calls with getting in touch to transfer this stuff and figure all of the migration out. So what service do you recommend to conduct the meetings? Is there any type of service that is required?
I would say there's no specific type. A lot of our screen sharing stuff we do through Skype, but recently I've been advising people to just sign up for a personal Zoom account and just use a personal Zoom link. And that software is great. You get clear picture, you're getting through, and you're being able to change stuff
Mm-hmm.
very quickly. And we use the same. We use Skype, we use Zoom here at Empire Flippers, and we call you to ask for updates, or we call you to even sometimes tell you what to say on the phone with Amazon support, or what script to use with Amazon support.
Yeah, it's the big thing that you want is you want to be able to do screen share. That's
Yeah.
you screen share and audio call is probably the most important thing. So, I mean,
Yeah.
as long as you use Skype or Zoom or something like that, it's whatever works and whatever you can coordinate between the buyer and the seller. So, how is inventory accounted for in this specific case? We kind of spoke on that a little bit earlier, but let's kind of dive into that again in case someone missed it.
Yeah, so for seller account takeovers, inventory is usually accounted based on the day that the credentials move over. So usually we take a snapshot of all the inventory that is during that point in time and how much money has been made since the last payout during that
Mm-hmm.
credential change. And so any money that has been made before that is usually the sellers, and then any money made after that is usually the buyers because the buyer's going to pay for the inventory at the time of that screenshot. And the screenshot is just kind of a reference point for us, but essentially, since we have access to that account, we can always see exactly what the inventory was at that point.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the key thing to keep in here is sometimes we try to make it
Mm-hmm.
easier for you. So you can do a credential changeover right after one of the payout sessions because Amazon pays out bi-weekly. And if you do it right after that, then any proceeds from that point forward will go to the buyer and he'll just pay for the landed cost of the inventory at that point in time. And so it makes the calculation really
Yeah.
easy.
Have you ever run into disagreements with the inventory management for payouts during the migration process?
We have run into, like I guess total amount or timing of agreements, but not really the
Mm-hmm.
dollar amount. And so sometimes they're like, oh, how about we just let my inventory sell out and I'll collect the profits from this? And sometimes the buyer's like, oh no, I thought we were going to collect all the profits right now. And so we do run into kind of like those timing issues, but at the end of the day, the golden rule is if you pay for the cost of the inventory, then you get the
Mm-hmm.
profits from the inventory.
Yeah. And so the worst, I mean, a bad thing that could happen would be, we ask Amazon for permission and they come back and they don't give us the answer that we want. If you don't get that, yes, it's okay to transfer the stuff over, what do you do?
So this is where persistence really comes in. That's with Amazon support. There's a lot of variety of answers sometimes, and so we do have a few scripts that we can update or a few extra responses that we help you coach through if they respond with something else that we're not looking for. But essentially, eventually, we always get
Mm-hmm.
the answer that we need. I'm not gonna lie. We have tried sometimes with Amazon support like 14 times or something like that. So it sometimes it just varies. Sometimes we get the answer on the
Yeah.
first one, but that's just how it
Yeah.
goes.
So I guess, and that's just some of the common questions that we run into. If you have any of your own questions, again, post them in Facebook or YouTube, and we'll get to them after we get through the rest of the slides that we have, because we want to be able to answer any questions that you have as a fan of Empire Flippers. We want you to be able to get the information that you want. But so now let's kind of move into the other Amazon FBA marketplace outside of the US. So that includes UK and let's start with UK and Europe. So what happens with the migration process if it's outside of the US? Is there anything different?
Yeah, definitely. So the biggest difference here is that we can't use the seller account takeover method for Amazon FBA businesses in the EU marketplaces. And so because of kind of the anti-money laundering laws out in the EU, the verification process from changing it in an account usually takes a minimum of 3 to 4 months, and it's also no guarantee that you'll be verified. And so with this process, just 2 to 3 months just for verification, it just won't work in terms of trying to close out a deal or within a migration timeline. And so that's why for EU businesses, we focus on doing listing
Mm-hmm.
transfers as fast as possible.
And do we need I mean, what about if it's outside of EU? What, like Amazon Japan and Amazon Australia, I believe, is setting up FBA. Like, do we have similar processes for those markets as well?
Yeah, so we haven't been able to test it yet because we haven't sold an Amazon Japan or Australia one, but I would assume that the support processes
Mm.
are the same. And when we get to them, we'll definitely try them. We're going to test them and see how we can get them moved.
So I guess another concern with Europe for Amazon FBA, and this is something that you run into in the real world too, is there's this, there's a lot of countries in Europe. And so in the real world, most of the countries in there are under this European umbrella. But is that how it works with Amazon FBA? If you're selling on Amazon Germany, Italy, do you need to have separate accounts?
Yeah, so for the EU side, you don't need to have separate accounts. Amazon actually offers a unified EU Amazon seller account where you can manage your marketplace listings all from one account. And that also includes like inventory and FBA inventory and adding ASINs there. So you don't have to add the ASIN for your product to each
Mm-hmm.
marketplace. You add it once and it's managed through your central location. So most people have this set up as their UK marketplace, and you can manage everything
Mm-hmm.
through there.
And so, how do the steps of the migration vary with the EU process to the US process?
Yeah, so like I said, you can also use this process with the US side, but it's a little bit less common. It depends on the buyer. But essentially, the first step in the listing transfer process is to have the buyer establish a new account. So in this case, we're going to establish a new unified European seller account. And the verification process for a new seller account is much, much quicker. Within a day and a half, you can be
Mm-hmm.
verified. Um, Once that account is set up correctly, you have a new seller central account. The buyer will work with the seller to add all the listings to the buyer's EU account. So this includes looking at the products that the seller is currently selling in their brand and moving them and being a seller in the buyer's account. During this process, you might run into a few issues with like brand registry or ungating, and we help you with documentation and our authorization letters to get through that. Once the buyer has added the listings to their Amazon seller account, we start with the inventory movement from the seller to the buyer. So the seller in this case will make a removal order from the seller's EU account and send that inventory to the buyer's account. And in that process, there's going to be some relabeling. So there might be a prep center involved depending on where the buyer and the seller are located. And so a lot of logistics and some issues that we help you through during that process. And at this point, we also recommend, holding at least 3 weeks of inventory in the seller's account so that you don't inventory
Mm-hmm.
out during this transfer process.
Yeah.
And once the,
Oh yeah,
yeah,
I was
no,
just
go
gonna
ahead.
add something that we run into is, and we kind of touched on this last week's episode when we were talking more about like accounting and stuff like that. But you really don't want to run out of inventory. So something that we would really recommend is making sure that you're safe. That's why Andy said, try to have 3 weeks of inventory, set aside for the seller, because the worst thing that could happen for the business during this period is you run out of inventory, and so the business like takes a plummet during the migration because there's no inventory to sell. So I mean that's just something to keep in
Yeah,
mind.
and we definitely work really hard to prevent this, and as a little tip, I know some sellers do this as well, but if you're running to your, second last piece of inventory and the buyer's still not live at, sometimes we just drastically increase the price so that we don't stock out. And it kind of slows down the sales velocity, but doesn't impact rankings like it does when you stock out, because stocking out is just really, really
Mm-hmm.
bad for your rankings.
Yeah.
It affects the business very
Mm-hmm.
quickly. And so, once the buyer has the inventory relabeled and sent back to his Amazon FBA warehouse, through his shipping plan, and he's live on the listings, we ask the seller to make all of his listings inactive and send the remaining inventory to the
Mm-hmm.
buyer. And so, yeah, and once all the listings are inactive on the seller side, usually, a lot of them won't be using the seller account anymore, so they'll close out their seller account. And now that the buyer's live on all the listings, we move into that second part of the migration where you don't need Amazon support as much. So now you're moving back into supplier introductions and training and strategy for the business moving forward.
This is kind of a crazy what if question that I just thought of, but it's something I thought of, so maybe someone else did too. Because of the steps that you need to take for the migration for the EU Amazon FBA business, have you ever run into a case where because you the seller and the buyer will both have listings up at some point? Have you ever run into where they're competing with themselves and that causes a downturn and some drama, I guess?
Well, I don't think it'll ever cause a downturn because, having more sellers on a listing gives you more options. People like to see
Mm-hmm.
options like that. So it's not going to affect your BSR or your sales velocity of the items, unless you're drastically losing organic rankings for some reason during the migration phase. But yeah, no, it doesn't really create any drama either, I would say. We usually just price one higher than the other so that we can remove the inventory from one of the accounts and send it to the
Mm-hmm.
other account. So yeah, no worries there. And plus, if you do that, we're still doing the inventory calculations for you. So eventually we'll figure out where
Mm-hmm.
the money goes.
And the inventory will be, in terms of who gets the money from the sale, who gets the profit. That's handled the same as it is for the U.S. side of things. Correct? Yeah.
Correct. Correct. So, the golden rule stays
Mm-hmm.
the same for inventory. But like I said, for scheduling purposes, for calculation purposes, sometimes it's easier just to have the buyer pay the landed cost on inventory that they receive, and then have the seller just get paid out in their account for all the remaining inventory that they sell during the
Mm-hmm.
migration process. And so sometimes it comes down to very little. But then that way you don't even have to worry about, if the buyer or the seller has to send extra money to each other. Makes the transition really, really easy.
So now let's tackle some common questions that we have with the, you know, uh, EU side of things. Man, I stumbled upon the letters there. The EU side of things. So,
Yeah.
uh, do you need some sort of prep center?
We would say normally because a lot of our buyers are not in the region for EU, that we recommend a prep center to help you relabel
Mm-hmm.
and resticker and get that inventory back to Amazon. Um, because, even in the US, even if you sent it to yourself, uh, you sometimes you don't want to relabel like 2,000 units. It's going to take a long time, and so we do recommend using a prep center, especially in the
Mm-hmm.
EU, to get that done for you.
Yeah, and do you need to worry about VAT?
At a certain level, you definitely do, and what we recommend is you talk to a VAT registered business professional. So a VAT consultant to tell you exactly what you need to do. Depending on where you live. So if you're EU resident, I'm sure there's different rules for that. If you're US resident, there are different rules for that. And so you should consult somebody and get those directions hammered out as quickly as
I
possible.
guess something worth asking is can you explain what VAT is if someone's unaware of what that stands for?
It's the European tax. Actually, I don't know the actual words to it, but I know it has to do with European
Mm-hmm.
tax laws. So you do have to address it when you're selling in Europe at some point. So
One of the most important things when selling on Amazon, whether it be uh, US, EU, wherever, is your reviews that you have. One of the most important thing is getting reviews, getting ratings on Amazon. And since you are creating a new seller account with, this process, what happens to those reviews that the business receives?
yeah, so when you create a new seller account, there's no way to transfer reviews from somebody else's seller account. So essentially, you're going to be starting out with a new seller account that doesn't have any reviews. But the good thing in this case is that your listings don't start over. So listings are owned by Amazon, and so when you're transferring listings by adding the ASIN number, you keep
Mm-hmm.
everything about the listing. That includes the description, that includes the variations, that includes all the reviews, and that also includes all the organic rankings that
Mm-hmm.
it has.
So you don't have to worry about, if you look at a business and think it looks good to buy because a lot of the products are, ranking in the top spots for that category, you don't have to worry about taking over the business and having to start, trying to rank them again, because that will already be done.
Yeah, definitely not. And because you're going to be the only seller on the listing, it's not a big as
Hmm.
of a deal. So you have the reviews for all of your products, which is great, but it's seller ratings only really come into play when you have multiple sellers, right? If you see, oh, four sellers, and oh, why does this one have no ratings? I'd rather buy from the one who has 100 ratings and it's been on time all the time. So that's when it really matters. But we sell a lot of these asset sales, and you're going to be the only seller on the listing at that point. And so it's really not a big deal, and you'll get those reviews uh, personally as you
Hmm.
sell more.
So,
So we don't want.
yeah, I kind of want to wrap up here and give our concluding thoughts on the migration process for Amazon FBA. And I guess if I had to give you one piece of advice for everything, it would be get started with getting all of your ducks in a row early. Get all of the information you need to be able to handle the migration, all of the steps that we outlined before. Make sure that you're ready. You have all of your login credentials, your account credentials. Make sure you have everything ready to go, because the more prepared that you are, the smoother the transition is going to be. And obviously, I mean, that's the whole goal, to have a smooth transition over to the buyer. Andy, if you had to give one big piece of advice, what would it be?
I would say my biggest piece of advice is don't worry if Amazon doesn't give you the right response. We will
Yeah.
get it at some point.
Yeah.
We'll just power through it, and sometimes it can seem like the process is taking a while, but it's actually usually pretty on schedule. So we'll get through it, we'll power through it, and we're there to help you with scripts or help do calculations and everything
Hmm.
throughout that process.
It's certainly, there is a lot to do, and that's why we do recommend using a service like ours. But, if you do get those responses, if you do have questions, the team is here for you. We can handle any
Yeah.
issue that comes up. We've been doing this a while. We've handled a lot of migrations, and if there are any issues or any extra questions that you do have during the process, I mean, come to our team. We are here to help, and we're very excited to help you, because, I mean, our goal is to help people get started with the businesses, and you know that's the whole goal here. So
Even a jump start, kind of like a jump start on their
yeah,
businesses.
it can kind of help you get going really quickly, and so it's really exciting. But speaking of Amazon FBA, let's kind of talk about a listing on Empire Flippers that you know kind of it is an Amazon FBA business. And what are some of the good and bad things that we see about this business? What are some of the opportunities and cool just areas that you can take this business and a business like this, not necessarily this specific one. But so this is listing 44286 on Empire Flippers. If you go to empireflippers.com/listing/44286, you can get more information about this business. But it's an Amazon FBA business in the office supplies niche, selling over $20,000 in monthly revenue, taking home about $7,000 in profit, and that's every single month. That's something that just kind of blows me away with these businesses. There's so much potential with Amazon FBA, and when you look at these numbers and what they're making, it's every single month. That's that's kind of a lot. And so something that this business has really going for it is that with the Amazon side of things, they're kind of, the foundation is set there. The foundation is very well put in place because they're ranking well, they have good reviews, all the stuff we were talking about that you want an Amazon business to have. It's kind of there. But some of the cool opportunities with a business like this is that because the Amazon side of things is so set, the foundation is there. You can take the business away from Amazon a little bit because the Amazon side of things will continue to be there, the foundation set, and it will continue earning passive income. But you can actively try to grow on, say a Shopify site. And if you do Facebook advertising, if you do Google AdWords, if you try to generate an email list, post content, all of these marketing opportunities can help you grow outside of Amazon, while the Amazon side of things is just kind of gonna keep churning in the background. That's something I love about these businesses. Andy, what's your takeaway?
What I really love about this business is, it looks like they stocked out, October
Yeah.
2017 for a bit, but the recovery was amazing. Like when you see an inventory stock out, you usually think, oh crap, I'm going to lose all my rankings. I got to start over and build it back slowly. But it came back very, very quickly for the SKUs. So their product is a very nice niched area where they don't have a lot of superb competition at the level at where the
hmm
product is. And I really love to see how quickly they recover from that. Um, yeah, so I love that about this business and the whole Shopify site not even being used as an extra channel of traffic. You can even send traffic to Amazon listings to increase organic search rankings.
Yeah, it's that goes back to what we were talking about earlier about making sure that you don't stock out, and our team will help you during the migration process to make sure that you don't stock out. But it's what Andy said. This business kind of had a very quick turnaround after they stocked out. They had a month, and I'm not looking at the specific chart right here, but I believe it was October, and they had this dip, and then the next month it was right back up, and it's held this steady profits, gaining slightly. I mean, this is obviously a niche and product that's here to stay. But now we want to turn it over to you guys, everyone in the audience. Let us know what questions you have. We are very interested in and very eager to answer your questions and help you get the information that you need. So our first question here is coming from Andrew. How long does it take to fully migrate an Amazon FBA USA account? So that goes back
Hmm.
to, yeah, that kind of goes back to what we were talking about before, about it being different for each business. And a lot of that also comes from how prepared the buyer and the sellers are to handle the migration process. But Andy, if you just had to say, like, on average, what do you see?
Yeah, I don't want to like oversell it, but on average, I would say 4 weeks, right? That's giving enough time for everybody to prepare everything and get items done. So 4 weeks, 4 to 5 weeks on average. I've seen it like from personal experience. I've seen it take 6 weeks just because certain things weren't set up correctly, and we needed extra inventory or something fell through, other factors. I've also seen it done within 1.5 weeks where the buyer already had all the information ready, the seller already had all the information ready. They got the right Amazon response. They moved it within 3 days of the migration, and inspection was done within 3 days. So, uh, like I said, there's so many factors influencing it, and there's some information that you can do to prepare. But yeah, short as 1.5 week, as long as 6 weeks, average 4 weeks.
And it really comes down to, I mean, how prepared people are and how lucky you get with getting the right Amazon response. But about 4 weeks is what you can expect. So, Andy, do you have any questions for us?
Yeah, we got a question from Peter here. Is it cool if
Yeah,
I
no,
do this
go
question real
for it.
quick?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. He's asking, are there specific things I can do to speed up or better prepare my business for an FBA migration? And so I'll just take a first
hmm
stab at it. There are a few things that you can specific to speed that up. Is first off is understanding the level of beginner or intermediate or advanced experience that your buyer has. So if it's a new buyer coming in, be prepared. We do this as well sometimes, but usually it's the seller who has to be prepared to, show them what is an ASIN. How do you add an ASIN into your seller account? Training them on what a shipping plan is or what your FN SKU labels are. There's going to be some extra basic training that you're going to have to help out with to better prepare
hmm
them for that. Because sometimes what we do is like to walk the buyer through doing it, but if they're the first time, it takes them forever. Anytime anybody's doing something for the first time,
hmm
it takes forever. So I would say understanding, we helped also to understand if the buyer is new and what type of coaching they might need throughout the migration process. That's a really big deal. Having your supplier transition documents ready or your orders ready for that. introductions ready is crucial. Um, yeah, and then other than that, any responses that we do with Amazon, we provide all that for you. So nothing you can really do to prepare there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my big takeaway on this question goes back to, I mean, what I gave is my big piece of advice, my concluding thought is, but just, be prepared with this, with all of the, account information that you need to be able to transfer over with the credentials and everything. And if if you're as prepared as you can be, I mean, then it'll be as speedy a migration as possible. And obviously, it depends on both parties being prepared. Like Andy was saying, he had this one sale he remembers where they were handling the migration process. It was less than 2 weeks. It was 1.5 weeks. Both the buyer and the seller were very prepared and able to get this done. He's also seen it take 6 weeks. So I mean, it really just comes down to how prepared everyone is and how much they know about what they have to do. And I mean, at Empire
Yeah.
Flippers, we'll coach you, we'll help you, and we'll make sure that you know what you need. But if you, I mean, I guess if you know ahead of time, you're ahead of the game. But
Yeah.
but yeah. Andy, do you have another question for us?
I don't at the moment.
Okay, guys, get your questions in here if you have any. Tim Lamburn says, "Good info, guys. I'm in the vetting process with you guys at the moment, so this helps a lot." Yeah, it's something to just really think about. There's a lot to do. I guess one question that I have for you, Andy, that I guess is worth bringing up is um, what happens if someone is unresponsive, whether it be the buyer or the seller. You make the deal, and then they don't back out of the deal, but they just aren't. They're kind of flaky. How does what does Empire Flippers do in that scenario?
Yeah, in that scenario, I would say that, for us, from coming from our perspective, we try our best to call, we try to email, we'll even try to text you, figure out, what's going on. Are you struggling with something? Are you missing our email? Sometimes it could just be a small miscommunication or they misplaced something. And we do try to find that out. And if it comes down to it, I think at the end of the day, there's a few clauses within our seller terms of service that talks about your ability to carry through the migration from the buyer's side and on the seller's side as well, for warranting full responsibility, full capability to
Mm-hmm.
do that. And so there is some legal language that I would say our lawyer would be better explaining to do that. But yeah, we try to reach you, we push you, and we try to get it done as soon as possible. To be honest, actually, I've never dealt with one that hasn't been super
Mm-hmm.
unresponsive. They're usually pretty eager to get the business fully finished
Yeah,
over.
that is definitely something worth noting. If you're selling, you generally the biggest reason for sale that I see with these businesses is you want the money for something else, whether it be a personal or a or a professional. You want it for another business, or you want it for to buy a house or whatever it may be. And so as a seller, you want this to get done as soon as possible, so you're just done with the business and can do the things that you want. And as a buyer, you're buying the business because you like the business. So generally, people will be eager. But as Andy was saying, there are certain legal you know know-how that if someone is completely um, just blowing it off, I mean, we can help you out with that. So yeah, I mean, that's gonna be it for us, guys. This is EF Live episode 3. I was gonna say 4. This is episode 3. So we're gonna be coming at you every
Awesome.
week with just information that we want to share with you to be able to help you run and sell your own online businesses. So Andy, thank you for staying up until who knows when in the morning to be on with me.
No
I
worries.
really appreciate it. I hope you had
Yeah,
fun. I hope you
sounds
had fun
good.
being on here. Do you have any
Yeah, definitely.
anything last minute you want to share before we wrap it up?
No, just the fact that, we do have a team here. It's not just me doing the
Mm-hmm.
migration for you. We do have a team just like we have in, other parts of our departments here that, rotates, that helps you throughout the migration process. So, don't worry about, if one of us doesn't answer and then you get an answer from somebody else. We're all looking at your
Mm-hmm.
ticket. We all are familiar with the process. So, you have a team backing you up, not just a single
Yeah,
person.
I mean, we're here to help, and we just really want everyone to have a good experience during the migration process. So that's why we have, trained members on the team to be able to help you. Guys, that's going to be it. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
EF Live episode 3 in the books. We will see you next week with, I believe, is our last topic in our little FBA series here. And then with episode 5, we'll be diving into another set of topics. So, uh, I really hope that this has been helpful, answered some questions that you have, and yeah, we'll see you guys next week. Have a fantastic day.
All right. Bye, guys.